With that, I would ask Senator McKoon to come and address you on this very important Senate Bill 129.
Well, good afternoon. I want to start off before getting into the specifics about this issue and address something I've been thinking about a good bit recently, and that is a lot of times when we're talking about things that haven't passed or haven't moved forward, some of us, I've certainly been guilty of this, can appear a little bit down in the mouth or downtrodden about where we are. And that is absolutely 180 degrees away from where I am. I was very frustrated in 2014 when we did not get this bill passed. I was extremely frustrated at the end of the session this year when we did not get the bill passed. But something that I have been seeing since April the 2nd, going around this state, something is happening. People are waking up. People are realizing how their issues are being handled under the Gold Dome in Atlanta. And so I think that, I'm actually getting to the point where I feel like the delay in moving this issue forward has been a huge positive thing, because it is letting people know that they need to get engaged in their government, that it's not simply enough to vote for this party or vote for this person, that it requires some engagement. And so I'm delighted to see this kind of turnout on a Sunday afternoon when there are a lot of other things you could be doing. And as I was walking in and just passing the cars in the parking lot, to see people who have come from all over to talk about this issue and why it is so important. So this is something to celebrate. This is something to be positive about. We are going to get this done. We are going to get this bill passed. And it's because of people like you who are realizing what's going on. And what I would charge you to do, after today, after this meeting, and if you're able to stay and see the film, which I hope you will, it is a powerful, powerful tool to educate people on this issue. Make sure that you go out. Everybody in this room has a sphere of influence. You have your family, your friends, people you go to church with, people you socialize with, people you work with, that you can be the person to educate them on this issue and explain to them what's happening in our state. So what I'd like to do for just a few minutes is break this issue down fairly quickly, talk a little bit about the legislative process, and then if there are questions, hopefully we can have some questions and answers, because that's what I think we're really here for, is to get into questions you might have. So, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, what is it? Because the first question people normally ask, as Virginia said, we've got the First Amendment to the Constitution. It says that you have a right of free exercise of religion. And what does that mean? I think that's a big problem with this issue. Is what do we mean when we say free exercise? You have the freedom to believe whatever you want anywhere. Somebody sitting in a room in North Korea can be believing that they are a Christian, right? They can be thinking that. If they begin to express it in an outward manner, they're going to go to a gulag, right? So there's a fundamental difference between the freedom to believe what you want and the freedom to exercise your faith. So the idea here is that you're not just limited to going to church on Sunday. You're not just limited to reading the Bible in the privacy of your own home. You're a Christian, or you're a person of faith. That's an intrinsic part of who you are. And unlike what we've heard from some on the left, you don't check that at the door when you go to work. You don't check that at the door when you go to school. You don't check that at the door when you're in the public sphere. But that's what this debate really boils down to, is two very different views of what the free exercise of religion means. We believe that it means what the founders intended it to be, which is that you can allow your religious faith to animate every part of your life. And that is generally how it was treated under constitutional law for most of our history. And in 1990, the United States Supreme Court, in a case called Employment Division versus Smith, said, you know what? If you challenge the government, if you say that the government has done something that burdens your religious liberty, instead of having something called strict scrutiny analysis, and if you just hang with me here for a minute, a couple of legal terms, strict scrutiny, think of it as a really high hurdle, or the top rung on a ladder. Strict scrutiny is the toughest possible test where the government has to articulate not just a reason, but a compelling state interest if they are in any way going to infringe on your religious freedom. And they've got to show that it's the least restrictive means available to pursue that compelling governmental interest. So how many people in here are familiar with the Hobby Lobby case? Just about everybody. Okay. So the reason that the Green family won that case is RFRA, because it wasn't enough for the federal government to just say, we have a reason here. They had to give a compelling reason, and they had to show it was the least restrictive means available. And because the federal government had already said to religious employers, you don't have to pay for abortion-inducing drugs, then the Green family was able to say, look, you've already admitted there's a less restrictive way of doing this. You've given this other accommodation. And that's why the Supreme Court found in favor of the Green family. So what happened in 1990 in Employment Division versus Smith is they threw out strict scrutiny. They said, we're not going to have that anymore. We're going to replace it with something called rational basis. Rational basis sounds like exactly what it is. They just have to have a reason. So again, think about that hurdle. Rational basis would be the lowest possible hurdle. It would be the bottom rung on that ladder. So Congress, in one of the few times they've done this in American history, reacted to that by passing the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So what did that bill do? All it did is restore the strict scrutiny test. It said, if you are going to interfere with someone's right of free exercise and they challenge you in court, government, you're going to have to meet this high burden, this high hurdle to overcome that. And by the way, that's the test that applies to the other freedoms guaranteed in our First Amendment. Free speech, free association, and free press. So normally what people then ask me is, well Josh, if the Congress passed that bill in 1993, and by the way it passed unanimously in the House of Representatives, including our present governor who was in the House at the time voted for it. It passed 97-3 in the U.S. Senate. It was signed into law by President Bill Clinton. And the author of the bill in the House of Representatives was a fellow from New York named Chuck Schumer. I don't know how many of you know him, but he's not really a right-winger, right? It was sponsored in the Senate by a gentleman from Massachusetts named Ted Kennedy, another guy that's not really known for right-wing politics, right? So I mean, there was a really unanimous consensus in the country that religious freedom was important and it should be protected. But 4 years later, the Supreme Court in a case called City of Bern v. Flores said, you know, Congress, you can tell us that's the standard for federal government cases. But if someone is suing their state or local government, Congress, this doesn't matter. It doesn't have any effect. They're going to get the low standard. So that leaves us where we are here in Georgia today. 30 other states since 1997 have said this is crazy. We're going to have the same standard for state and local government that we have for federal government. It doesn't matter what branch of government you're dealing with, you're going to face that high hurdle. Here in Georgia, this is the situation. If you're an airman in Warner Robins, or if you're an infantryman at Fort Benning, you get the high standard, the high level of protection. If you're an inmate in a federal prison that's in Georgia, you get the high standard. But if you're an ordinary tax-paying citizen who finds yourself in a situation where state or local government is infringing on your religious freedom, you get the low standard. Well, that simply doesn't make any sense. So we wanted to bring this bill forward to provide uniformity in the law and to make sure you have the same high level of protection regardless of what level of government you are dealing with. So let me quickly go through some of the objections. The first objection people give oftentimes is, well, Josh, we're in Georgia. Our religious liberty isn't under assault. It's not under threat. I want to give you two quick illustrations. Savannah State University, there's a Christian student organization on the campus. They get kicked off of campus. A university bureaucrat says you're violating our anti-hazing policy. So what did this group do? What offense did they commit that violated anti-hazing policy at Savannah State University? They held a discipleship retreat on campus, and as part of the discipleship retreat, they had a foot washing ceremony. And the university administrator said foot washing constituted hazing. Now that's silly, but as a result of that administrator's decision, they kicked the group off of campus. There was no Christian student organization. It took 3.5 years of litigation before the university finally came to its senses and allowed that to end, that suspension of that organization to end. Now, if somebody on the left was standing up here before you, what they would say is, well, see, Josh, everything's fine. It's working just like it's supposed to because the people of faith won. Yes, these 18 or 19-year-old students, after 3.5 years of fighting, after realizing an authority figure was telling them something that was wrong, after finding counsel that was willing to, on a volunteer basis, pursue the case, they were able to get the university to settle about the time most of them would have been graduating. Now, if we were talking about a voting rights case, and somebody told you people weren't allowed to vote in 2010 or 2012, but their right to vote was restored in 2014, I don't think people on the left would be saying that's a success or that's proof that the law is working. But that's the state of the law here in Georgia on religious freedom. Here's a more recent example for you. Down in Villa Rica, there was a football coach. He simply wanted to be baptized on the football field. He talked to his pastor about it. He said, this is my vocation. It's important to me to have this seminal moment in my life occur on the football field where so much of my time is spent. They went to the school principal. The school principal said, that's fine. It's not a problem. Just don't do it during a practice. Don't do it during the school day. And of course, after all, this is public property, right? So they did the baptism. They wound up drawing quite a crowd, as a matter of fact, people that wanted to see this moment in the coach's life. The coach was important to a lot of students and to a lot of others. No one was required to be there. No one was forced to come. It was just going to be the coach and the pastor. But word got out, small community, and that's what happened. The Freedom from Religion Foundation in Madison, Wisconsin sent a letter to the school district and said, this is an establishment of religion. You have got to establish a policy preventing this from happening in the future, or we're going to sue you. And so the school district has now imposed a ban. And you think about this. You think about if any other group of people, if a free thought society that the Freedom from Religion Foundation sponsored, if they wanted to have an event on the 50-yard line of the football field on a day where there wasn't a school activity going on, do you think the school would stop them from doing that? Of course not. I mean, what these folks are trying to do is they want to use the mechanism of government to impose their belief system on you, to impose their militant brand of atheism on the people of this state. And that's wrong. The government's supposed to be sort of like a referee. You know, the government doesn't come in and endorse a particular religion, but you know what it also doesn't do? It doesn't suppress your free exercise. And so those things are happening in our state, not in some faraway place. They're happening right here in Georgia. Now, Virginia talked about the discrimination issue and the economic development issue, and I think pretty well covered that. I'll add one thing on economic development, and that is this. There is zero evidence that states with RFRA, 30 states around the country, have had any economic development problems because their people are more free than people in this state. And if we concede that argument on this issue, because I know a lot of people here are concerned about the totality of the Constitution, not just necessarily First Amendment issues. If we say, you know what, we can't do this because it may hurt us in terms of economic development, I can promise you we'll be gathered here a year from now and there will be a bill pending on gun control. And you'll be hearing people say, well, you know, we're not going to attract these businesses from New York or New Jersey because our people are too free to have guns. You can literally make this argument about every individual civil liberty protected by the Constitution. So we cannot give an inch on that argument, and we shouldn't. So let me talk a little bit about where we are in terms of the legislative process, and then I will wrap up so we can have some questions and answers. This bill was introduced in 2014 by Representative Sam Teasley in the House and by myself in the Senate. We had a controversy that arose over a law that was proposed in Arizona. Now let me tell you just a quick bit about the history there. Arizona has had the law that we are trying to pass on their books since 1999. The controversy was over an amendment to that law that was proposed by a member of the Arizona State Legislature. I've talked to Governor Brewer, and I can tell you, she supports the federal RFRA language. And that language is still the law of the land in Arizona today. But because of the media firestorm that resulted, we weren't able to get the bill moved forward. So since we adjourned in 2014, we did a lot of meetings, similar to what we're doing today, and tried to educate folks. So in 2015, we came back again. Representative Teasley introduced House Bill 218. I introduced Senate Bill 129. We got it to the Senate Judiciary Committee. We had some issues in the Senate Judiciary Committee in terms of moving it forward. There was some interest in trying to make some changes. And frankly, some changes that could have been detrimental to being able to move the bill forward. People like you got on the telephone, came down to the Capitol, sent emails, and we were able to come together. We did make some changes to the bill, okay? We made some changes to make people more comfortable. That's fine. I've got no problem with that. I understand there's a give and take in the legislative process. And then we moved it out of committee. Then we sent it to the Senate floor. Now, you probably will never see a headline about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act without seeing a word like divisive, like it divides the Republicans. You know, we've got some Republicans for it, some Republicans against it. But it will probably surprise you to know, when this bill hit the floor, guess how many Republicans voted no on Senate Bill 129? None. 0. We were totally united on this bill. We were totally united because the Senate Republican caucus understands that this bill, mirroring federal law, is simply to protect your religious freedom. There's no nefarious motive going on here other than to protect the religious liberty of all 10 million Georgians. So then we moved over to the House. We went to the House Judiciary Committee. Did not seem like we were going to get a hearing, I'm going to be honest with you. Once again, people like the people gathered here today got on the telephone, they sent emails, they came down to the Capitol, they made their voices heard, and we got a subcommittee appointed. We spent about 12 hours in subcommittee, lots of different changes being proposed. Once again, we compromised. We agreed to some changes that I frankly didn't think were needed, but they didn't undermine the purpose of the bill, so we made those changes. And we came out of subcommittee with a bill that all of us could be proud of. After 12 hours, after people working hard to perfect the bill, people like Judge Johnny Caldwell, who spent, 12 hours in the subcommittee, I don't know how many hours out of committee, working on this thing. So we had a perfected bill that came out to the full committee. And then we had a representative, Mike Jacobs, who's no longer in the General Assembly. Representative Jacobs, who had not served on the subcommittee, who had not been engaged in this issue at all, proposed an amendment. Now, if you read the media reports about this, what you're going to read is that he just wanted to add some anti-discrimination language. Let me tell you what the amendment actually said. The amendment said that if RFRA conflicts with local or state law in any way, then RFRA doesn't apply. Well, the whole point of this is to restrain state and local government. So if we essentially give them an opt-out, then any county commission, any board of education, any city council in the state can just pass an ordinance saying, you know, RFRA's not going to apply here. The other thing that you got to keep in mind is, what does the word discrimination mean? I mean, we all think of discrimination in pretty negative terms. I'm discriminating against contact lenses right now, you know. I'm discriminating against digital watches right now, right? So so again, it's important to know the amendment was designed to kill the bill. The amendment was designed to make it so that RFRA would have absolutely no impact on the daily lives of 10 million Georgians seeking the same protection from state and local government they already have from the federal government. The amendment passed on a 9-8 vote. 3 Republicans voted with 6 Democrats to pass the amendment. Representative Mike Jacobs, who offered the amendment, who's no longer in the House of Representatives, Representative Beth Duskin, and Representative Jay Powell. Now, even with a 9-8 vote, I can tell you, because I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee, when there's a vote like that, as the committee chairman, I can vote to create a tie. And if there's a tie on an amendment, it fails. And Chairman Wendell Willard was at the meeting. Chairman Willard could have voted to cause the amendment to fail. He chose not to do that. So what happened is we had an amendment added to the bill that made the bill meaningless. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of Republicans having show votes. And I'll take it from that response that you know what I mean. But the idea here was to move the bill out, right? And then there could be a vote on this meaningless bill, and then everybody could go home and say they voted for religious freedom. Thankfully, we had some quick-thinking people on the committee, people like Representative Barry Fleming, who moved immediately to table the bill. The bill was tabled, and that's where it's sitting right now. It's in the House Judiciary Committee, because we're on a 2-year cycle. We don't have to pass it in the Senate again next year. We just have to get it out of the House Judiciary Committee in a form that will work, and then get it passed out of the House. And if it's not identical, then it'll come over to the Senate where we'll agree. So what we have to do as conservatives on this narrow, specific issue, we need the House Judiciary Committee to substitute language. My suggestion would be to substitute the language of Senate Bill 129 as it passed the Senate. But even if we got the version that came out of subcommittee, that would be acceptable. But to get rid of the poison pill language that was added by Representative Jacobs, and then send it to the full House for a vote. I know, and I want to be real clear about this, because sometimes I get accused of trying to run down fellow Republicans. The vast majority, if not all, of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, if this is put on the floor for a vote, they're going to vote for it. This bill will pass if they're given the opportunity to vote. But it's going to be up to all of us to make sure that we get the right kind of bill out of committee, and then that bill goes to the floor. Now, I will take just a moment to mention to you, RFRA is not a silver bullet, okay? RFRA will not end the debate on religious freedom in our state. There was a Supreme Court decision in June that redefined marriage in this country, redefined marriage for all 50 states. And you're probably going to see legislation. Legislation modeled on the federal First Amendment Defense Act. And I'll just very briefly tell you the 3 kind of scenarios that would deal with. The first one is whether state or local government is going to start taxing houses of worship that teach traditional marriage. And you think about it from an income tax perspective, it doesn't really matter that much. But if Kasim Reed, who's no friend of religious freedom, by the way, instructs the tax office in the city of Atlanta to start taxing churches, assessing property taxes on churches, and you're talking about using the power of government, the power of taxation, to silence viewpoints with which the government disagrees. And that is wrong. The second thing, and the First Amendment Defense Act would deal with that. It would deal with that issue. The second thing it will deal with is government accreditation. So you think about private K-12 education in our state, the vast majority of it has some sort of religious affiliation. There is a real possibility now that accrediting agencies will say, well, you're teaching bigotry down at your school because you're teaching traditional marriage. So we're not going to be able to issue accreditation to your high school diplomas. And the impact that would have on private K-12 education in the state would be devastating. First Amendment Defense Act addresses that. Now, those first two things I gave you are things that could happen. This last one is something that has happened in states that have had same-sex marriage on the books for some time. And that is telling faith-based adoption agencies that either you're going to adopt out these children to who the government tells you to, or you're going to have to shut down. In the state of Massachusetts, Catholic Adoption Services was placing 2,000 at-risk children every year. But in 2003, the state of Massachusetts said, you've got to make a choice. Choose your faith or choose to continue this adoption service under conditions that the government's going to mandate to you. And they had to shut down. Same thing happened in the District of Columbia. A First Amendment Defense Act for Georgia will address all three of those issues. So I know I've gone on a long time. It's dangerous to give a lawyer a microphone and a captive audience, but I will stop there, and I'll certainly be subject to questions if that's appropriate, or whatever Margaret wants me to do, I'll do.
I like that. Yes, we will open it now for Q&A, and Virginia, would you like to join Josh? Where are you? Oh, where's Virginia? McKoon, would you like some tea? If you have questions for Virginia or Josh, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So we know that the Speaker of the House hasn't been a friend of this. He's the only roadblock.
Well, let me say this, and again, I'm going to put some facts in front of you, and then you decide what you think about that. I know a number of you have probably followed, and I am going to make all this come around back to religious freedom. A number of y'all followed the Iran deal in the Congress and the Senate about whether or not we were going to approve Obama's deal with Iran to essentially grant them nuclear weapons. They should have been treated as a treaty, but they passed a law that basically reversed the burden. So instead of needing 2/3 to approve it, the president suddenly just needed 1/3 to approve it. And then you have Republican leaders, gnashing their teeth on television. Oh, I can't believe the president's gotten his way again. Well, we, of course, laid the groundwork for all of that, right? So here's what's happening right now. In the House Judiciary Committee, I mentioned that Representative Jacobs is no longer on the House Judiciary Committee because he left the House. So that created a vacancy on the House Judiciary Committee. Now, when that happens, the Committee on Assignments in the House of Representatives, comprising their leadership, has the responsibility to fill that seat. Now, we have a lot of Republican lawyers, probably more lawyers than y'all would like in the legislature, but they're like me, they're conservative, they understand the importance of religious freedom. I'm not naming any particular names, but I will say there are a number of folks who are lawyers, who are Republicans, who have seniority, who are not currently on the Judiciary Committee, okay? The Committee on Assignments appointed Taylor Bennett to that seat. How many people in here know who Taylor Bennett is? Okay, so give me just one more minute so I can give you all this background.
You're alone.
Taylor Bennett was elected to fill the unexpired term of Mike Jacobs. Taylor Bennett is a Democrat. Now let me say this. Ed Harbison, who's from my area, who's a state senator, Ed Harbison's a Democrat. But he's a good guy. We don't always agree. We vote differently sometimes. But a lot of times we vote together. Taylor Bennett's not one of those kind of Democrats, okay? Taylor Bennett is out on the extreme. And let me give you just one quick example. Taylor Bennett was endorsed by Planned Parenthood in his campaign. Now, then all these videos come out. Everybody's seen the videos, the Planned Parenthood videos, the trafficking in body parts. So all of that comes out. And a reporter puts a microphone in his face and says, "What do you say to all of this?" And he doubles down on the endorsement, says he's proud to be a Planned Parenthood champion, intends to be so in the legislature. He also explicitly ran a campaign against protections for religious freedom. So just to circle back, there was a spot on the committee. Over here, you got conservative Republican attorneys. Over here, You got a 29-year-old lawyer who's an extreme leftist who has not served a day in the general. Who has not served a day in the General Assembly. The Committee on Assignments chose him. So, you know, I'll be like Fox News. I'll let y'all decide. But those are the facts.
Comment real quickly. You probably don't want to say it, but Mr. Jacobs got a judgeship for his amendment that killed Rifford this time. And that was given to him by Governor Deal.
All I can say is I know that Representative Jacobs was on a short list at the time all this went on and had been for a long time, and he now serves as a state court judge in DeKalb County. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things as a grassroots activist that causes us a lot of anger is the fact that we elect our representatives, but many of them, when they go to the Georgia Capitol, instead of representing us, they represent the Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and Big Business. The Religious Freedom Act was one of them, the tax increase another one. Senate leadership defied the Chamber of Commerce and their threats and championed this Religious Freedom Restoration Act. But House leadership catered to the Chamber of Commerce instead of representing their constituents, and they did everything they could to block it. What can we do to change that? Governor Deal opposed it too, and he blocked it. What can we do to change House leadership and, you know, the fact they think they represent the Chamber of Commerce, not their constituents?
Let me make one additional comment about kind of the environment that we were in from a legislative standpoint, because I want to be completely transparent with everybody here. I believe, based on conversations I had with Chairman Willard, that we were going to get another hearing on Senate Bill 129 before we adjourned. The Sunday before that meeting was to take place, Governor Mike Pence from Indiana was on national television talking about the Indiana bill, which we can get into a discussion on that if you want. But I'm just going to say the interview did not go well. I don't think Governor Pence has been properly briefed on what the legislation did, and I believe that made people very nervous about then advancing the bill. So I do think that there was a willingness, because of the discussion we've been having, to try to move this forward. But that sort of was just really awful timing for us. But I'm going to turn it over to Virginia to address what you can do.
There are a lot of things you can do, and Debbie, you've been a partner in crime with me in doing these things before. So I'm going to say that you have to show up down there sometimes. I know you work and that kind of thing. You can't be down there every day. But there are people in your sphere of influence that can come down and be with us. And I'll give you a great example of this. Someone who will remain unmentioned slid into a House bill a little clause. We did not find out about this clause, and believe me, it was not Santa Claus either. It was a really bad clause that said that every organization like mine, a 501c4, had to report every single donor. That if your Tea Party was registered as a 501c4, you had to report. The NRA would have to report every single donor. Do you remember this? You remember the IRS trying to do this? Well, guess what? The House passed it. They did not even know they had passed it. And the reason I know that is because as soon as I heard about this the night before the very last day of session. And the House had already passed the bill, and I was like, this is unbelievable. So I started calling my House member friends. I go, do you know you voted for this? And they went, no, I did not. I said, go read the bill. It's up on the House website. And they went, they told me about it, they went, oh my gosh, we had no idea, because it was tucked in. It was a little bitty section. It was worded in a very, not very clear way, on purpose, I think. To hide the intention of it. It said basically these groups will be added to code section blah 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 of IRS code. Well, that doesn't mean anything to most people reading it, right? So they did not know they had voted for it. So the last day, we had already asked, we always go down there on the last day, we'd already asked all our friends, not only with our organization, but with other organizations, to come join us on the last day. So literally, and then the Senate did a great job. They killed it, you know, on their end, the Senate caucus. The House, they kind of wanted to stick with it, but they ended up taking it out. They did take it out because they got tons and tons and tons of pressure from people like you. So there's a few days that if you can, please come down. And let me take a minute to say, we are going to do a religious freedom rally. And does anybody know who the Benham brothers are? That had a show on HGTV that got canceled because they stood up for traditional marriage? They're coming to be a part of our event. So I hope that you'll be there too. Go ahead and put it on your calendar. It's going to be in February. The date is going to escape me right this second, but if you will get on that newsletter, you'll have it, I promise you. We'll get you all that information, but we very much want you to be a part. I want you to get that bumper sticker and put on your card. They're hearing from the Chamber of Commerce. They need to hear from you, but I'm going to say a quick thing about my Chamber of Commerce. I'm very involved with my local Chamber of Commerce, and I was in a meeting the other day, and somebody who's kind of a big shot, I'm not going to name him, but he's kind of a big lobbyist and very influential on the RBC, which is a Chamber of Commerce kind of subgroup of the 15 metro chambers. He said, we're not going to fight RFRA from our end if I have anything to do with it. So all of the Chamber of Commerce is not against you. You need to know who is, and there are specific companies who are, and you need to be calling them. If you own stock in them, you need to go to your stockholder meetings. Look at your retirement fund and see what you're supporting through your retirement money, and see if you are on one of those, if you're a stockholder and you can go to a stockholders meeting. But anyway, there are a lot of things that you can do, but the main thing is please, please, please stay engaged and then come down to the Capitol at least once or twice during the session if you possibly can. And we'll be glad to hook you up with who needs to be talked with, right?
I will tell you on this bill, this was a second attack on the grassroots from the House. If you remember a few years ago with the ethics bill, they wanted, House leadership wanted to, this is an effort by the Chamber of Commerce is behind it, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, to silence the grassroots. Remember the ethics bill? They wanted all of us to have to register as lobbyists if we've been taught to our elected officials. And I agree with you. We need to make phone calls. We need to be engaged. We need to, and I think during this session, we need to actually call these companies that are trying to stop RFRA and tell them we're going to boycott.
Well, that's an idea, and okay.
This is the tag on what she already said. If you would mind first, because this is really important. Virginia, you need to tell us who that legislator was, because that's what we're all trying to do, is target these people and get them out. If some guy's undermining, slipping stuff like that, we may know who it is. So who was that?
Well, one of them that was involved in it has already resigned and has been replaced. You know, we have 6 new House members, which I think could be a really good thing. So we need to get to know those new guys, and I've already made an effort to do that. It was somebody very close to where we are right now, Jack Stater.
Well, if it was David Lawson, say so, because I'm not afraid to
Yes.
say this is what we have to stop doing, being politically correct. If it was Ralston, just say it was Ralston. That's what I'm saying.
I will say this. I wasn't there when the bill was being written, but when that section was taken out, the speaker did take to the floor, and this is just history, guys. I'm not accusing anybody. He took to the floor and he said, "We are going to get this through next year." So we're going to be fighting this again this year.
About the bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir?
I just have a question. Is there anything that coming in the legislature is going to protect churches and pastors who don't want to conduct gay weddings, you know, that keep them from being jailed or persecuted?
That's one thing that the speaker has said he was going to do, is a Pastor Protection Act. And people ask me about it, well, is that good? Is that enough? And I said, well, I support anything that protects our pastors and our churches, but we should also protect all of you, you know, the other believers. And Josh may have more to say about that.
Yeah, and let me say this. You know, I believe, going back to the stuff I was saying right at the beginning, I think that the momentum in this debate is with those of us who are here. There were people that were saying at the outset of this debate, you know, First Amendment's enough. You don't need anything else. But to Virginia's point, the Speaker himself has said he is going to make sure that a Pastor Protection Act is brought forward during next year's session that would put into Georgia code a specific protection that any minister, priest, rabbi, pastor, you name it, is not going to be compelled against their will to officiate a same-sex marriage. Now, what I would say to anyone, either someone that's in church leadership or you're concerned about this happening at your church, you should seek legal counsel. There are lawyers who are helping churches, particularly with their bylaws, and structuring bylaws and membership in churches in such a way as to avoid this sort of situation from coming up. I know that there are boards of deacons who are even talking to pastors about having Christian covenant ceremonies celebrated at the church, and then the legal document, the marriage license, instead of having the pastor sign that as officiant, having someone else do it. But all of those issues, whatever the legislature does, my advice to you would be, and not just because I'm a lawyer, but because I think it's wise, is to seek legal counsel on and have your bylaws reviewed so that those corrections can be made to address that concern.
And actually, we did that. Faith and Freedom did that for our Paulding County chapter. We invited every pastor. They didn't have to belong to us or anything, but we just invited all the pastors in the area to come. And we had our attorney come down from D.C. who used to work for churches to protect them. And so he came down and did a little seminar. We'd be glad to do that in any area where we have high interest in that.
This will be the last question.
We've got three.
The question I was going to ask. Why wouldn't we just pass a bill where I didn't need to hire a lawyer to tell me what my rights were as far as going to church or not going to church or whatever? It doesn't make sense that I need to hire a lawyer to find that out. That's why we have legislators.
He's got a point. The point is that we can't actually act as private citizens any longer without some kind of fear of litigation. It's a sad state of affairs that you need a lawyer in order to speak.
And let me be clear about this. You know, we are doing everything we can to put people in a position where they don't have to worry about going to court. But I'll tell you this, as long as we've got people who are on the radical left appointing federal judges, there's very little any of us can do with a federal Article III judge who says he's going to write new constitutional law. And so that's why I'm offering that advice. I'm not saying anybody has to do that. And I wish we did not live in a society where I felt like I needed to be in LJ, Georgia on Sunday afternoon asking y'all to help us pass Senate Bill 129. But the other side, and that's the important point, I think, if you take anything away from today. You know, America's always been a pluralistic, you know, you live according to your faith, I'm going to live according to mine. That is the society we have had. But the folks on the radical left are not satisfied with that. They are not satisfied with being given equal rights and equal protection under the law. They want to use the government to suppress any point of view with which they disagree. And that's why this sort of effort's necessary, because they aren't content to simply deal with the tradition we've had in this country for 200 plus years. They want the government out there for the first time in American history saying, here's column A and here's column B. If your church's beliefs fall into column A, you're okay. If you fall into column B, we're going to start punishing you until you go away. And that's why we've got to do something.
Now, why mad as hell? Where does the Supreme Court get off playing God? Because that's what they did with that decision. And it's way past time for civil disobedience in this country. Our sheriffs, our local sheriffs, are the reigning lawmakers in our county. And if we want to pray in school, say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, have Christian plays in our school, or anything else, the federal government can kiss my you-know-what.
I'd like to respond to that and say, because the federal Supreme Court said that there's gay marriage in this country, the Supreme Court does not write law.
Right.
So why are we all obeying it? So we obey it, we legitimize them when they do badly. And Kim Davis was right. There should be more Kim Davises. Is there any in Georgia? Anybody who will stand up and say no to the Supreme Court, who's acting unconstitutionally itself? It has no right to write law. So why do we obey it?
Okay, so
Because we're
that,
cowards. We're gutless cowards that won't stand together and do civil disobedience.
okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to end this, but all good things come to an end at times.